might you appeal with Medicare for refusing a claim? Well, here to talk with me about that is Jae Oh, author of Maximize Your Medicare. Jay, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
Pleasure. So I don't know how often it is that Medicare refuses a claim, but I'm sure when it does, people need to know what to do. Help us with that.
It can certainly seem unsettling to the Medicare beneficiary for sure. So the reality is there are two separate paths depending upon what Medicare setup or configuration one has. Let's just take original Medicare plus Medigap. In this instance, the question is whether or not the healthcare service you're receiving is actually covered by original Medicare, which is approved by the federal government. In this instance, what would happen is you would appeal directly to the federal government, to the CMS. They would be the ones who would say whether or not you are covered under Part A or Part B for this particular service. There are steps to that. And from that point, the Medigap carrier doesn't really have leeway or say here. It can be commonly thought through that, well, the insurance carrier just doesn't want to pay claims. That is actually not correct, which is that the carriers are literally saying, okay, if original Medicare covers the healthcare service, then the Medigap plan, that carrier will pay the balance. Nuances of Plan N and Plan G, K, and L aside. But that is the process. For Medicare Advantage, it is very, very different, which is the arbiter, the determination party, if you will, is the Medicare Advantage carrier, meaning that the Medicare Advantage carrier can require authorizations for particular sets of healthcare services. Now, this has become a lightning rod of sorts because, as you can imagine, that someone can feel very, very worried that they would go through this prior authorization and be refused. Under this, there is a known path that is you can find on Medicare.gov, for example, as well as Maximize Your Medicare, my book, which details the process, multiple steps, levels of appeal processes that would be taken, these steps be taken, but the appeal originally goes to the Medicare Advantage carrier, not to original Medicare. So these two situations are very, very different, resulting in different ways to resolve this type of unsettling event.
Yeah. From a practical point of view, Jay, it would strike me that the healthcare provider who's submitting the claim on the part on behalf of the beneficiary would know in advance what would what kind of claims would be accepted and perhaps which would be refused. And is that the case?
In general, I think that is the case. Yes, we don't have lots of evidence saying that the healthcare provider just simply throws up their hand and says, "I have no idea." That said, it may sound like from my explanation, my brief explanation of these two paths, that under Medicare, original Medicare and Medigap, that everything is, 100% no problem. I wouldn't necessarily say that either, which is that, again, the Medigap carrier will follow precisely after and only after original Medicare approves. That also means if the doctor sends in the particular prescription late or they neglect to do so, the Medigap carrier will not recognize that claim at all. In which case, you have to double back and get this kind of prescription or a written instruction from your doctor so that the Medigap carrier can see that and then know and fulfill its contractual responsibility. And so the reason I swerved here a bit to give you this example was because to stress the point that very, very frequently this confusion results from the fact that people are not exactly precisely sure about how Medicare actually works. So I'm trying to give some clarity on that point.
Yeah. So, in your experience, when you see claims that have been refused, are there instances where it's a matter of something being miscoded or something just actually not being covered by Medicare?
Uh, it is usually the first of the former of those two, for example, in original Medicare. That, yes, on top of that, for example, like I said, the dog ate my homework, and so the Medicare system didn't find the original prescription for a service. Yes, for example, human error can exist. There's no question about that. And so as a result, again, this is not the responsibility, candidly, or the burden sitting with the Medigap carrier until the Medicare system approves coverage under Part A or Part B. From that point, I've seen, I can't remember, not even 5 instances where a Medigap carrier misunderstood. So, in other words, it is entirely dependent upon the healthcare service being approved by original Medicare.
Yeah. So, bottom line, key takeaway.
Well, the bottom line is just to be clear about the path, and it differs based on whether you have Medicare Advantage or Medigap, Medicare Supplemental, Medicare Supplement 3 terms meaning the same thing.
Yeah. And folks who are watching this can learn more information, more detailed discussion at maximizeyourmedicare.com and also by signing up for your newsletter.
Certainly, if you go to maximizeyourmedicare.com, there's a location there where you can sign up for the newsletter, which I call Jay's Corner, about Medicare healthcare cost planning and the different components in financial and retirement planning, for sure.